Tranquility du Jour, January 14th, 2019. Looking for a tranquility reset? Trade in a week of winter for a week of sunshine, coconut water fresh from coconuts, amazing food, yoga, creativity, mindfulness, and self-care with me in beautiful Costa Rica. And this is happening over President's Day weekend. So those of you who are stateside and get that day off, you just need to take 4 days off for a 7-day vacation. You can learn more at KimberlyWilson.com/Costa Rica. Hello there, this is Kimberly Wilson, and welcome to the 439th edition of Tranquility du Jour. Delighted to be back with you. For the past couple of weeks, I've been knee-deep in editing and bringing Year of Tranquility to life. And I'm delighted to share it is now available over on Amazon. There's a link in the show notes, but it can be found at KimberlyWilson.com/YOT. And for those of you who have the app, just a heads up that I'm going to be doing a private podcast just for you guys that will pop up in the app later this week that tells all about the process of Year of Tranquility, of bringing it to life. And those of you who don't have the app, just, you can find it in iTunes. It's $1.99. And it's also, I have it over in the show notes, which can be found at KimberlyWilson.com/439. So wanted to give a little shout out and bonus to my beloved app people. So thank you for your support of the Tranquility du Jour app. Now, without further ado, delighted to share and introduce you to today's guest, which I just thought was the perfect way to start the new year. So I'm chatting with Ashlee Piper, and we discuss her new book, Give a Shit. Do good, live better, save the planet. It is so good and so practical. So in this podcast, which we went on and on and on because we had so much to talk about, and I feel like we could have done an extra hour easily, is learn ways to simplify, to save money, and do good for your health, the animals, and the environment. And we talk about ways to be more eco-mindful, eco-friendly, the whole 9 yards, in your home, in the kitchen, in your closet, in the mirror, and in the wild. So I think you're going to love today's podcast. Now, before we hear from Miss Ashlee, I wanted to mention a few things that are coming up. One is the 4-week Tranquility Salon. Was supposed to start last night, but Mother Nature had other plans due to our lovely, beautiful, quite fluffy snowstorm that we had. So we're actually pushing it back and starting next Sunday, January 20th. And there's one spot left. So if you're interested in deep diving into creativity, mindfulness, self-care, and dreams with a small group of amazing women, would love to have you join. And there's a link to that in the show notes. Also, if you are interested in escaping to Costa Rica next month, my annual retreat, which is probably going to be my last one for a while, despite having done these since I think 2001, Tranquility in the Tropics. And that's happening February 16th through the 23rd over President's Day week. So if you are interested and available, would love to have you join us. And then also TDJ Live. So thanks to everyone who tuned in last Sunday for TDJ Live. Oh my gosh, I thought we had such an amazing group. Everyone was so engaged and so enthusiastic about the new year, which tends to be the case for the new year, right? So you'll find a link in the show notes to the in case you missed us, to the download for that. And then also save the date. March 24th is our next one. And that one, of course, is all about spring and bringing into, or kind of like budding into, what we want to bloom and bring forth in that new season. So there's a link in the show notes to that. And then also, if you like to come to Tuscany, Italy, July 13th through the 20th. We have a few spots left in that retreat, which will be just an amazing experience. And you can learn more, of course, over at KimberlyWilson.com. So again, I just want to say a big thank you to everyone for your enthusiasm and your patience as Year's Tranquility got released. You're going to hear all the stories behind it in the private podcast for my app my app lovely ladies and gentlemen. And then also just, a very happy new year. So exciting things happening with Tranquility du Jour this year. I'm going to be sitting down and doing a lot of strategic planning and kind of just like brand shifting and, just ways to really kind of hone in on finding a way to be kind of even more powerful. And what I mean by that is, ways that we can really kind of work together to make a difference in our lives and the lives of others. And one really cool thing that I did in preparation for this was I pulled together the TDJ5 tenets, and you can find those in Year of Tranquility, and I'll be talking a lot more about those this year. So the 5 principles are: number 1, compassion; number 2, creativity; number 3, style and beauty; 4, mindfulness; and 5, self-care. So I really worked to hone in on what is it that we do here at Tranquility du Jour? And that was how I was able to kind of synthesize it all down. And again, I'll be talking more about that this year, but I hope these resonate and cover really all the different things that we've talked about on the podcast over the past, 15 years now? 16, 15? I can never do the math. Since 2005, so that would be 14 years. But, we've covered so many topics, right? From mind mapping to animal welfare to art to design to beauty. And so I'm excited to really hone in on what it is that really embodies and encapsulates Tranquility du Jour. Now, without further ado, our guest, Ashlee Piper. So she's a political strategist turned vegan and eco-lifestyle expert, writer, and TV personality whose work has been featured in and on Glamour, Refinery 29, Apartment Therapy, Design Sponge, Women's Health, Reader's Digest, The Chalkboard, Mind Body Green, VegNews, Vegetarian Times, and more. Her new book, which actually came out in June, but it's so fabulous, on sustainable, stylish living. It can be found. There's a link in the show notes to purchase it. And again, give a shit, do good, live better, save the planet. Piper is also a brand strategist and influencer for some of the world's most ethical and innovative companies. Her clients and collaborations include Lush, Eileen Fisher, Vegan Cuts, Follow Your Heart, PETA, and HSUS, the Humane Society of the United States. Prior to dedicating herself to eco-evangelism, Piper was a political strategist and cabinet-level advisor to some of the country's most high-profile politicians and governmental organizations, including Governors Mitt Romney and Deval Patrick, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, and U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, where she worked on campaign and policy strategy surrounding universal health care, child welfare, and public housing. She holds a BA from Brown University, an MA from the University of Oxford, UK, and a degree in holistic health from the Institute for Integrative Nutrition and Columbia University. She's a 12-plus year veteran of Best Buddies International, a volunteer and adopter with the Anti-Cruelty Society, and a board member of HEART, Humane Education Advocates Reaching Teachers. She lives in Chicago, Illinois. Welcome, Ashlee.
Hi, thank you so much.
So thank you for being here on Tranquility du Jour and for writing this amazing book, Give a Shit, Do Good, Live Better, Save the Planet. So tell us a little bit about the impetus for writing this amazingly great practical handbook.
Oh, well, first of all, Kimberly, you are so sweet to have me on, and thank you for saying such nice things about the book. I truly appreciate it. The impetus for writing the book was, for a few years now, I've been doing TV segments and writing journalistic pieces for various mainstream magazines and outlets around practical, actionable, sustainable living. And whenever I would do TV segments that would maybe be, 3 to 5 minutes long, and they'd be focused on how to find cruelty-free cosmetics or, just how to create your own reusable arsenal, simple things like that, I would always get messages through my website or on social media from people who were like, I saw it. I found it really helpful. I would really love to know even more things that I can do to help the environment, kind of bite-sized, snackable content that's easy to act on. And unfortunately, you can't really do that in, a short television segment. And so many of the journalistic pieces I was working on were very focused either on green beauty or ethical fashion. And I wanted to kind of bring all of those things together into one home. And I hadn't really seen many sustainability books that had done that either. They all were really great, but they were focused on different silos of sustainability. There would be, cookbooks on kind of veganism or locavore stuff. There would be books on green beauty and organic beauty, books on ethical fashion, and then books on like zero waste, kind of more niche, I would say, lifestyles within or under the umbrella of sustainable living. So I wanted to bring all that together into a really practical handbook that someone who is new, someone who's pretty seasoned and well acquainted with the world of sustainability, that everybody could get something from. And so that was really kind of how it came about.
Well, you've done such a great job, and listeners, we'll be talking through 5 different areas in your home, in the kitchen, in your closet, in the mirror, and in the wild. And so again, there's a lot, as you said, Ashlee, lots of like really super practical tips, and not just for newbies, also for seasoned or vice versa. So if this is like, the first time you're picking up something like this, I think you'll be enamored. And if you're, you've read a lot about this, it's still a wonderful compilation of so much in one little book.
Well, thank you. Yeah, that makes me feel so nice, Kimberly. That's what I was trying to do, girl.
You did it.
Thank you.
And now at the introduction. So I feel like we kind of have to start here a little bit to be like, okay, why is this so important? And you have a piece called World on Fire. And we know that science is real, right? And that climate change is happening. And can you tell us a little bit about, the data so that listeners who may be new to this could learn a little bit more about what is going on?
Sure. Well, I think when you write a book, it's very much a point in time document. So the book, for instance, went to the printers early last year in 2018. And since then, quite a few reports have actually come out, which are really great resources that I would point folks to if they're looking to get even more current information on what is actually happening with the planet. The UN climate report that was recently released a few months ago is, I think, one of the more astonishing reports as far as showing the urgency around mitigating climate change as much as possible, and really giving us only a handful of decades of ideally like 20 years for us to get our shit together, for lack of a better term, to help the planet. And there have also been quite a few studies that have come out as well, further supporting that animal agriculture, for instance, is one of the most damaging industries to the planet. And so, in the book, I talk a lot about, and there are still very current sources there, and I have a pretty robust index of every single citation that I have, of which there are like 300, 400. I think I lost count after a while of how many there were. I talk about actually like what is climate change, and actually climate change is a word I have kind of mixed feelings on, because it's become a highly politicized word that was originally intended to make global warming seem not as problematic as it is. A lot of times folks who are quote unquote climate change deniers will use the term climate change because truthfully the earth has been heating and cooling itself for millennia. So they say, oh, it's no big deal. The earth's climate changes all the time. The difference is and it has been, the earth knows how to recalibrate its temperature, but by very small percentages of degrees. What's happening now, I kind of liken in the book to like before it was like a mall cop on a Segway. And that was sort of the speed at which these things the temperature was changing on the planet. And now it's like we're in a Lamborghini on the Autobahn. It's been changing so rapidly, so dramatically, so quickly. So beyond just the book, I would definitely recommend also going to NASA's site. They have incredible information, really demystifying what global warming is, how it impacts other areas. And then through the book, I go through and I also unpack a lot of different areas of climate change and and those impacts. So for instance, we know that climate change will affect physically lower lying countries much more quickly, and actually is already, than like North America, for instance, just because of where they are geographically. So we see that in, for instance, like India with mass amounts of flooding and rainfall, more than they've ever had before. We see that with beach erosion in different archipelagos that are lower lying. So we know that climate change, in a way, actually, a lot of those countries are economically not as robust as the quote unquote Western world. So there is a racial and ethnic component to climate change when we act like it's no problem. So I like to focus on a lot of those things too that people aren't often talking about with climate change too, and I touch on that in the book.
And, one of the pieces, too, that you touch on and that you just mentioned that I think is really important is animal agriculture and its effect on the environment. And, maybe we can get more to that in home and kitchen. But, can you just say a little bit about that? Because, as a fellow vegan, I know how clearly this has a huge effect on the environment, and yet also such a huge effect on these millions, billions of animals. So can you say a little bit about that?
Absolutely. There's plenty of people, I'm sure, who are like you and I, who became vegan through animal rights, maybe. And I don't want to presuppose how you came to veganism, but a lot of people are like, oh man, all these animals are dying. This is terrible. So that was my first gateway drug into veganism, or really vegetarianism, and then veganism. But even folks who aren't ready to go vegan or vegetarian can still make a really positive impact on the planet, because animal agriculture, and there are so many studies out there, many of which are from very reputable institutions, like I mentioned the UN earlier, the University of Oxford, which happens to be one of my alma maters, have been doing longitudinal studies on the impact of animal agriculture on the planet. And they show that animal agriculture wields anywhere from 14% to 51% of negative climate emissions that actually impact global warming or climate change. So in certain studies, it's actually ranked when you consider all of the transportation that goes into moving these animals, processing these animals, all of the emissions associated with raising animals, all of the deforestation associated with and land clearing associated with raising animals. 51% is huge. That's enormous. And so we look at those numbers and we think, holy crap. So many studies actually have it ranked as the number one polluter of the planet. So even eating one or two fewer meaty meals makes, I feel, a big difference. So in the book, I definitely talk about veganism, and I actually have a recipe section too, because I wanted, again, for this to be like a holistic journey for the reader. Like, I didn't just want to be like, hey, maybe you should eat fewer animal products, and then they have to go out and buy a separate cookbook to get started. So yeah, I think people often ask me what is the biggest and most impactful thing I can do to help the planet. And I always say, and I try to say it without judgment or without being overly prescriptive, but I always say, man, eating fewer animal products is, I still believe, one of the biggest things that you can do for the planet.
Right. And it sounds like it's what the data shows.
Right. The data overwhelmingly shows that, including the UN climate change report that recently came out. And they come out with that pretty regularly, but the most recent iteration is very clear that, and if we keep eating the way that we're eating now, and we also keep, the population keeps growing the way that it's growing now, we'll see entirely fishless oceans by, middle of this century. So it's pretty scary stuff. And our resources will run out if we keep eating in this way as well.
Well, let's start looking at some practical things that we can do, right, to make a difference. So, clearly.
Yeah, let's brighten it up.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm like, we're doomed.
We're doomed.
Yes. But you're not doomed if you do some of these things.
Yeah. So in your home, right? So what are some things, that we can do? And what I love here, it's like, where you had about, oh gosh, the piece about, turning off the light, and you're like, and if you're not at least doing that, Oh yeah, when not in use, turn off the fucking faucet, television, and lights. You're grown. You can do this. I was like, oh my gosh, that's so funny, right? Because you're right. You're not judgy. Like, this is funny, right? Because this is stuff that like we all know, you know, and it's, you know, such an easy thing to do if we just pay attention.
Yes. Yeah. I think I really wanted the book to be fun and empowering while also arming people with like the information that they need about what the heck is really going on with the planet and what they can actually do that can have a positive impact. But I did want it to be fun. I didn't want it to feel super stuffy, and I didn't want the like the action items to feel impossible. Like I certainly appreciate people who are overachievers, but I'm not going to go tell people to, you know, make their own clothes and wash them by hand every day and mill their own flour. That's simply not realistic for a lot of us who have full-time jobs and busy lives and families and all of these other responsibilities. I certainly applaud people who want to go that extra step, and I think everything makes a difference. But the book was really meant to get people revved up for small changes that have a big collective impact. So in our home, I think our homes are pretty great just because obviously we live there and we spend a lot of time there. But I also think it's a wonderful staging point for trying out different habits that are eco-friendly in your life and seeing what actually works for you, because not every recommendation in the book is going to work for everybody. So you can kind of try and fail pretty safely at home, and then perfect whatever new habit or lifestyle you have, and then feel confident enough to kind of bring it out into the wild. So that's why I have a home chapter and then in the wild chapter. As far as home goes, though, beyond the basics, obviously, like you talked about, of turning off the lights and the water when not in use, one of the biggest things I think that people can do is to stop using paper towels. Which, when I say that, when I do TV segments, people cringe because Americans have a serious love affair with paper towels. And I actually find when I go to other countries, you just don't see paper towels around as much. And they're always mentioning like, oh, the Americans and their paper towels, like we're just obsessed with them here. We use them for everything. And an easy swap is to get some great dishcloth and reuse those and wash them with your regular laundry. And it's something that for some folks might take a little getting used to, but there are studies out there that show that people who have a very heavy paper towel habit spend up to like $500 to $600 a year just on paper towels. So you can save money by doing this, but you also save a ton of trees, a ton of resources. Most of the time, paper towels are swaddled in that thin crushable plastic that cannot be recycled. So you're also cutting down not just on the waste the waste of trees essentially that are being cut down to produce paper towels, but you're cutting down on the packaging waste and the travel of them too. So it seems like a very easy and economical switch for most people. The other thing I recommend, and this has become really popular with the Netflix show on about Marie Kondo and tidying up. So I'm happy to see so many people at work, who I see every day who are real like hoarders. I see them actually looking at their lives and kind of paring down. But minimalism is one of the cornerstones that I talk about in the book. And I think it's important because it's not just an ethos or a lifestyle. I think the fewer things you have, the fewer things you need, the fewer things you need to clean, you need to maintain, the fewer things you need to offload. So I'm not trying to tell anybody live an aesthetic life and don't have anything that brings you joy and don't have knickknacks or hobbies or whatever. But a lot of us have more stuff than we know what to do with. There are labor studies out there that show that we waste a tremendous amount of time every day just looking for things. We need, and anybody who has a large purse knows what that's like, or kids. And cleaning things. We also spend a ton of time cleaning stuff. And Americans have embraced, actually, for better or worse, external storage. So we've maxed out our basements, our closets, our garages, and now storage units actually are more populous in the United States than Starbucks and McDonald's combined. So that shows me that we have quite a problem with stuff. And the more stuff, the more resources that it takes a toll on to produce those things. And also the more things we need to maintain them, to keep them clean, the more time we waste trying to find them and maintain them. And, you know, how many of us have freaking 3 lamps or three identical things at home? we don't need, or how many of us have stuff that we bought because we simply like just felt bad and we wanted to buy something. So minimalism in a way, I think, is one of the biggest things to embrace, because the less you need, the less likely you are to fall prey to buying a bunch of new stuff and, cluttering up your home, but also wasting a time and resources and needing a bigger home, needing external storage, all that stuff, which are huge energy sucks on the planet as well. I know I just became really popular. Everybody's like, oh God, this girl wants me to get rid of all my shit. But I feel like minimalism made me a lot less of a pack rat, and I still have everything in my life that I love and I need. So that's why the book also really does focus a lot on decluttering, whether it's your closet, your beauty routine, your grooming routine, or your kids or your home, because we all are kind of swimming in stuff.
Yeah, the idea of minimalism, I think, is such an important piece to keep in mind with all of this. And, as you said, like if you're not using it, get rid of it. There's the rule, right? If you haven't touched it in 3 months, get rid of it, or you haven't touched it in a year. And, getting down to really what are the essentials. And it doesn't mean you can't have pretty aesthetic things, but it's also like, how many of those do you need, and are you actually utilizing them?
Exactly. It's all about like functionality and utilization and the joy that you get from those things, I think. Because we all know folks who have, just a ton of stuff in their homes, and they keep bringing in more, but they don't actually really use anything. I think we have to look at our shopping habits too, which we're about to get real deep in here. But, we're susceptible human beings who want to belong, who want to feel loved, who want to feel accepted and part of something. And marketers know that. So a lot of times they found that we make, maybe 10% of our shopping decisions consciously, and the rest we make completely emotionally. So they're not utilitarian purchases like, oh, I need snow boots because it's snowing outside. They're like, I need this phone because this commercial made me feel a kind of way, or I need this dress because I'm stressed out. And in the book, I actually talk a lot about how when I had a different career before, I had of money, but I was lacking a lot of the other things in life that brought me contentment, ideally. And so I would shop a lot, and I found myself with an overflowing closet of stuff I never wore and stuff I didn't even really like or appreciate, which is shameful. And I bought it because I was feeling a kind of way after work, and that I needed that temporary fix. And we think that temporary fix is kind of innocuous. It's not that big of a deal, but it's what's putting us in debt. It's what's putting such a burden on the planet, because industry has to produce more and more and more things. Fashion is a great example of that. And it clutters up our lives and distracts us from what's really important to us. Now I'm sounding real dramatic.
No.
Really, it's supposed to be a fun podcast. I'm like, we're all going to die.
By 2050. Yeah, no.
Alone and in debt.
We're surrounded by storage lockers or storage facilities. But yeah, no, I think what you're saying is so important. I think particularly from a minimalist perspective, essentialist perspective, from a simplicity perspective, and really, it's like, why take more than you need? I think it's just one of those great things to keep in mind. And I do feel like there's so much of a movement in that direction. It used to be so much about accumulation. And now I think it's a lot more, at least from what I see and what I feel. Even in a conversation I had with somebody at lunch today, and it's just this idea of like, I want less and I want things that are more meaningful. So I love what you're preaching.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll be minimal aesthetics together, my friend.
So let's talk kitchen. All right. So
let's do it.
How do we, have a kitchen that, besides the paper towels, of course, and, consuming little to no meat, what are some ways that we can help the environment and help ourselves and others in the kitchen?
Sure. So there's a pretty robust checklist in this section, after I go through all of the reasons why animal agriculture is tough on the planet. The biggest things that we can do outside of that, because I definitely wanted to give people who are like, I'm not ready to give up meat, I can't do this, I wanted to also give them actionable steps that would still feel like they're making a difference, because they do. So shopping package free as much as possible has actually gained a lot of popularity, I would say, on social media with sort of the low and zero waste movements, which I'm grateful to see. And so I outlined for folks in the book how they can shop more package free. So that's everything from the usual suspects of shopping the perimeter of a traditional grocery store and trying to buy the unpackaged, uncellophane, unswaddled and soft plastic produce, for instance, but also to looking at and being more attentive to stores that might have bulk offerings. And I'm not talking like the kind of bulk you see at Costco or Sam's Club, but rather bulk bins where not only can you get items that are unpackaged and still really wonderful, but you can actually save quite a bit of money. And I do talk a lot about particular savings in the book in a variety of ways, because before I wrote the book and before I got interested in living sustainably kind of as a side hustle and a career really, I was transitioning careers myself. So I used to be a political strategist for about a decade. And when I became so interested in this type of lifestyle personally and really wanted to transition to do something like this professionally, I had to get really comfortable with not making the same kind of income that I used to. And so through this lifestyle, just in 1 year, implementing a lot of the tips that I espouse in the book, I was able to save upwards of $15,000. I was able to get rid of debt that I had. I felt healthier. I lost weight. There were a lot of wonderful benefits to living these tips, like living my truth, essentially. Beyond just it's the right thing to do because it's good for the environment. So here I was transitioning from a career, trying to figure out what I was going to do next, not making a lot of money. In some cases, cleaning the bathroom at my local yoga studio just so I could get a free yoga class here and there. And I started shopping more package free, because it was just a really economical choice for me, especially as a vegan at the time. I found I could get all the legumes and the spices and the grains that I like to eat for a lot cheaper, sometimes anywhere from to 30% cheaper than the packaged versions. So doing something really that was out of necessity for me, but holy smokes, it was really good for the environment too, because I was buying a ton of extra plastic. And a lot of people don't know, I realized this when I went to visit my family in Texas just recently for the holidays. And they've known me this whole time through this whole journey, but they were throwing that crushable plastic that like bagged salads and a lot of produce come in. They were throwing that just in the recycle bin. And I was like, oh, that's not recyclable. Like there are very, very few places, in the US that will actually recycle that kind of plastic. It's just real tough to recycle. And I'm not talking about like Ziploc bags or grocery bags. I'm talking about kind of the crunchier plastic. So a lot of people think that those kinds of packaging are recyclable, and they're simply not. So by buying fewer packaged items, anybody who just transitions, I recommend even like finding 2 items that you buy in packages that you can get in bulk. Nuts are a really great example. Grains are a good example. Super easy, super cheap to get package free. Those are simple swaps for anybody to make, and you'll find you save a lot of money. Another thing I actually recommend is to prep your food pretty much the minute that you get it, home. So what we oftentimes fall prey to is we go to the grocery store and we get us a watermelon and cauliflower or whatever, and we keep them like on the counter or in the fridge. And then we come home and from a long day at work and we're like, oh my God, I'm starving. I don't know what to do. But then we think of all the preparation that has to go into cutting that freaking watermelon or roasting that cauliflower, whatever it is. And we say, nah. And food waste is a huge problem in the United States, not because it's vulgar how much food we waste, given that other countries have, are experiencing famine, given that we have people who are considered food insecure and food unstable here in the United States, most of whom are elders and children. But also because when organic matter, like wasted food, gets into a landfill with more organic matter, it creates way more methane than would normally be produced. And that methane traps way more heat than other gases. So methane is one of the biggest contributors to global warming. So I recommend folks get compost and also do whatever they can to limit their waste in the kitchen. Because both of those things are just great. They're better for, a lot of reasons. Like for instance, I live in Chicago. I know I'm going on a long train of thought, but I'll be done after this. I live in Chicago. We used to have a landfill near, like in the city, and we've since exhausted that. So now all of our waste is actually trucked out, further out into the suburbs where there's a landfill. So just think of the transportation involved in that and the emissions associated with the transportation to get all of our trash, a huge city's trash, to, somewhere that's 20, 30, 40 miles outside of their area. So when you actually institute in-home composting, like I have a service that comes and picks it up via subscription every 2 weeks, you'll find that your trash, just generally the stuff that you send to landfill, is cut down so significantly. And then if you're actually prepping your food when you get it home and you're buying only what you really need, you'll also find you're wasting less food because you're going to eat it. I mean, these sound like really simple tips. Like one of the simplest things I recommend in the book is before you go to the grocery store, snap a picture on your phone of your fridge and your pantry. And that way, when you're wandering the aisles of the grocery store and you're like, oh my gosh, do I have this thing at home? You can just look at the picture and say, oh yeah, I got that thing at home already. So you're not buying more stuff than you need.
Yeah, no, I think that's such a great reminder. And the thing around composting and all of that, we started saving these Trader Joe's, like, kind of like, they're not tins because they're like, like the heavy cardboard, but quite large that, have coffee beans in them. And then once my boyfriend goes through the coffee beans, then we keep them and then we use them for like banana peels, bags of tea, things along those lines. And it's amazing. Cool. Yeah. What you can, accumulate that really you would just be tossing. And yet, then you can take it, put it in your garden, or as you said, have a company that comes and picks it up. And there's a lot of those type, options, around the country.
Oh yeah. And I hear from people all the time who are like, I don't have a subscription service. I don't have a yard. But I know that there's a farmer's market that I've started going to, and I just freeze my scraps and bring it to the farmer's market. A lot of folks who actually are on farms will take it, put it into compost that they can use. So there's always kind of an option. But even when I lived in a place in Boston, for instance, 11 years ago, that I lived in a really far up, walk up, small apartment. I had no yard. There weren't compost, services around then. One of the tips I talk about in the book is I didn't have a car. Ride sharing wasn't a thing then. I would walk to get my groceries and I had like 2 bags. And once those were full, that's all I'm getting for my grocery shop. And that was a very physical reminder of like, these are the, like hulking all that stuff home through the snow, through the elements, like really made me appreciate and use what I bought. So that was also when I started buying kind of lower packaged things, like gone were the big things of pre-made broth, gone were the big bottles of iced tea and juice and things. And instead I started making a lot of that stuff at home because, a bunch of tea bags is a whole lot less heavy than a big old bottle of tea. So it's just, simple things like that just make you very acutely aware of the impact that you actually have on the planet, but also in your life. And how you waste things just because we're used to wasting stuff.
Right. And we're used to big shopping carts and then we towed it to our cars and then we drive our cars home. Yeah. So it's, there's something about having to haul it up a walk up or, haul it home from in the city that definitely helps you cut down.
Oh, it humbles you, believe. It really does. Also a great diet, but
yes,
neither here nor there.
Exactly. And exercise. So let's talk closet. Okay. Closet is, of course, a big one, in the fact that, we can accumulate so many things. And, I've been on a big kick of having a uniform, which I wear the same thing almost every day and just add additional layers. So easy. I'm never like, what should I wear? And, then the capsule wardrobe. So can you talk a little bit about closet and what we can do to be a little more eco-friendly there?
Sure. Most of your listeners might already know this. I feel like the statistic is kind of out there, but we individually, every year Americans throw away, I think it's 71 pounds of clothing per person per year. Throw it away, as in it heads to the landfill. We throw away a ton of shoes. So, we are big wasters when it comes to the clothes and the accessories that we already have. And then I think anybody who hopefully has read the news ever knows that fast fashion is also a really big global issue. It's a problem. The fashion industry is anywhere from the 2nd to 5th most polluting industry on the planet. It's also one of the biggest sources for child labor, slavery, sexual trafficking, general trafficking, and people not being paid a fair wage. So, and of course, this all happens, many, many miles away in other countries where human rights standards and animal rights standards are not quite the same as what we are fortunate enough to enjoy here. So I think the biggest thing that I recommend is, again, minimalism. Like you said, you have a uniform, you have a capsule wardrobe, finding something. It doesn't have to be a preset number, even though I shared my own capsule wardrobe on there. Finding something that works for your life will cut down on a ton of stress and time wasted, and also exorbitant purchases made that just are not necessary in your life. So you save yourself a lot of time and money and stress by paring down your wardrobe. But if you do need to incorporate new pieces in your wardrobe because life is life, secondhand first is always my motto. So finding it secondhand as anywhere possible. Thrift stores, consignment stores, Poshmark, eBay, ThredUp. I know a lot of people who love that. I'm a big Poshmark fan myself. Even I really like clothing shops. I hold one pretty much every season with friends of mine. It's a great way to meet new people. It's a great way to offload items that you love and get them to better homes. I just generally think just sharing with people too. I had a pretty fancy function I had to go to. I did not want to go out and search for a new dress, and really didn't have the time to do it either. And just pinged a few girlfriends who were kind of similarly sized, and they said, we got you. And we just kind of got together and hung out, had a few alcoholic beverages, and I tried on different dresses that they had, and one worked perfectly. So, we've gotten away from that sharing economy a little bit that we used to have when we were like settlers and pioneers, where if you needed something, you would just go down the street and ask a neighbor. Now it's pretty tough to find people who actually know their neighbors. But, there's no need for us to go out and buy all brand new stuff just for a one-off occasion, for instance. So asking people if you can borrow something that they have, or letting people borrow something that you have. A clutch purse, for instance. I know I'm speaking more to women here, but a clutch purse is something you use pretty rarely for, a handful of occasions per year if you're lucky, and if you're into that kind of thing. It doesn't necessarily necessitate, unless you are really, really into fashion or really into collecting things like that, in which case I don't want to take that joy away from anybody. It doesn't necessitate going out and buying all brand new stuff just to have it for one evening. I'm sure that there are people that you can borrow it from. So secondhand first is always my mantra. If you are going to restock with something new, I encourage folks to look at ethical makers. So that is, and I provide a lot of kind of parameters so that readers can build their own rubric that feels right for their value system of what ethical means to them. So for instance, some people might be ethical vegans, and they might be really interested in supporting businesses that don't use any animal products at all. I tend to be one of those. If I buy something new, it needs to be vegan. And I know a lot of wonderful people who are independent makers who are hustling and on that small business tip, making a beautiful, conscious product. Anything that's made fair labor or fair wage, usually things made locally, things made in the USA, things made with eco-friendly, repurposed or zero waste fabrics and methods are always great too. Then I demystify and define a lot of what that means in the book so that folks can, again, build their own playbook for how they want to restock ethically, their closet. But those are really the three tenets, minimalism, secondhand first, and ethically bringing new things in, and then also ethically offloading. We have become like a people who just dispose of stuff, and we expect everybody else to deal with it for us. And now, we're seeing reports coming up that like those Planet Aid boxes, for instance, that used to be on every single corner in big cities, and people would just shove like anything they could into those big metal receptacles, that there's really no place for our used clothing to go. Other countries don't want it. It takes a lot of resources to get it there. So, first, when it comes to things that we think we may not want, I encourage people to look at, like, are you getting rid of this dress because it's missing a button, or because it's, this sweater because it has a tiny tear in the hem? If so, fix those things. Take your shoes to a cobbler, get that shit cleaned up, and they're good as new. You'd be really surprised at how you can reinvigorate and breathe new life into clothing that you thought was going to be headed to the landfill. And then if it's beyond help or you don't care for it anymore, find somebody directly who will want it. I have tons of friends, we all like, and you do too, where we, might be wearing something and our friend will be like, God, I really love that. I love that sweater. I love that jacket. Well, if you're not into it anymore, give it to that person. And then I recommend, like, very, very last resort, donating something to, a charity shop or Goodwill or Salvation Army or thrift store, because you never can quite guarantee if an item's going to be accepted by those places when you just blindly drop off. And they may end up going to the landfill. We've seen it before. So ethical offload is a really important thing to think about too.
Great tips and great reminders. And, the last two pieces that I want to touch on are mirror and wild. So let's chat a little bit about these two. So mirror, a lot with regard to our beauty routine and our grooming routine.
Yep. So in there, I talk about, again, trying a beauty fast for 3 months, which is something that I did, and I found it to be extremely helpful. I'm a reformed product junkie, I would say, a big Sephora shopper in the past. And a lot of people don't realize that a lot of cosmetic products, the packaging cannot be recycled, because usually it is a mixture. Like, think of a mascara tube, for instance. It's usually a mixture of plastics, metal, sometimes glass, sometimes fibers and fabric. So it's extremely difficult to recycle those. So I recommend people embrace minimalism when it comes to their beauty routine, whatever feels right to them, and that they also look at companies that have buyback programs or recycling programs. I talk about Lush a lot. I love them a lot. They are a very conscientious company that happens to align pretty darn well with my personal values of respecting people and the planet and animals. They have a great recycling program. They are also making their makeup line completely revamped, completely package free. I'm into it. It's still pretty high performance. I know that Origins will also take back their own containers. And then there are all these like great brands like Aether Beauty and Elite, which have refillable containers. So you're not creating as much waste. In there, I also talk about simple zero waste or lower waste swaps. There's actually a chart in the book for, like, say you're used to getting, big old bottles, plastic bottles of shampoo with pump top. What can you replace that with that's better for the environment? Shampoo bars are all the rage now. Razors, for instance, are very difficult to recycle because of the mixed materials in the blades, especially. So I recommend, a stainless steel safety razor, which once you get the hang of it, you'll never want to go back. And talk about feminine hygiene too. The book isn't just for women, but I certainly get to menstrual cups and reusable cloth pads and, a variety of ways that people have kind of hacked their period to be eco-friendly. And I think the biggest thing in the mirror that I talk about is animal testing. A lot of folks think that it is an archaic process that does not exist in the United States. And I would say that probably still around 70 to 80% of our personal care and beauty and grooming products in the United States are still tested on animals. So I give those gory statistics, not to get dramatic or depressing, but about what animal testing really is, what it really looks like, what these government allowable tests are, and how when we purchase products from companies that do test on animals, we are essentially supporting that practice. And nowadays, we're really blessed that there are so many companies that do not partake in animal testing in any part of the formulation process. So there are plenty of great high-performing options that we can look at and use instead of like the traditional nasties that are bad to animals. So them's my tips for getting good in the mirror.
Well, and it's a great reminder, because I remember for years I used a certain type of mascara just from CVS drugstore. And then I realized that they test on animals. So the next time I went for a new product, I just pulled out my phone and I Googled, and there's a lot of great websites out there that'll tell you, like best brands for, drugstore kind of purchases that do not test on animals. And I was shocked, like Wet and Wild, which, I always thought was like a cheesy kind of tween brand. Oh my gosh, they have the best mascara. And so, they don't test on animals, and they're really inexpensive. So, whenever you're curious or you're just like, oh, I'm not sure, just pull out your phone and you've got so much data at your fingertips.
Oh, you're so right. And that's a perfect tip. Like you just outlined one of, I think, people's biggest misconceptions around being a better steward of the planet. They think it's going to be so much more expensive. Nuh-uh. Elf, Eyes, Lips, Face, they are also cruelty free. Mix is cruelty free, Wet and Wild, and just recently CoverGirl announced that they're going entirely cruelty free. They received the Leaping Bunny certification. That's huge. They're the biggest cosmetics company on the planet to adopt cruelty free. So I think that's just going to become kind of a global movement, which I'm very, very grateful for. But it's not more expensive and it's not any harder to find things and patronize those things that are better for the animals and for the planet.
Yay.
Yay, right?
Leaping Bunny.
I know. It's so great.
So my last piece for you is wild, right? So this is when we are out and about in the world, from activism to all sorts of great things. So can you talk a little bit about how we can be more mindful kind of in the wild?
So I talk a lot about having a reusable arsenal. Sounds dangerous because it is dangerous to climate change. So having something on you, whether it's in the office, I carry one with me in my bag pretty much wherever I go, that will help you to eschew disposables when you are out, is one of the single best things that you can do in the wild. So I bring with me, like a water bottle / thing that I can get iced coffee in. I usually have a metal or stainless steel tiffin with me, or some kind of Tupperware type of thing if I need to get leftovers. I have a cloth napkin. I have reusable cutlery. Sometimes I'll have a stainless steel straw. Sometimes I'll have a stasher bag with me, which is like a silicone kind of Ziploc bag alternative. And then I always have kind of reusable shopping tote on me, and those things make it so freaking easy to not need to get plastic cups, paper cups, straws, sleeves, takeout containers, all of the things, even paper napkins, all of the things that we know are notoriously difficult to recycle. And if they can be recycled, pretty much never make it to recycling anyway. Just look in a trash can at Starbucks and you'll be like, people don't know how to freaking recycle. And so that stuff is hopeless and it's heading to the landfill. So that is a really powerful thing you can do that's actually really easy. And I don't find it puts a lot of weight in my bag. And, I will go to like a CVS or something and I'll see people and they'll be buying like a nail polish. And the clerk will offer them a bag, like a plastic shopping bag, and they'll take it just for the nail polish. And it's like a girl who's got a huge purse. She could like find room in there. So even if you're caught without your reusable arsenal, you don't need to get a ton of bags. We have hands, we have cars, we have our backpacks, we have our purses. Just being mindful about like where it is that you can say, no thanks, I actually don't need that. So that's one of the biggest things. And we can do that when we travel as well. I think that's really important. And it also saves us a ton of money. And I find it actually saves a lot of hassle too when I go to the airport if I just bring my own food with me. And, I fill up my water bottle there. Easy peasy. I'm not paying $8 for a plastic bottle of water. And I'm probably eating healthier and I'm not having to scour the airport for vegan food. Travel is another thing that's, we all do it. We all like it. I think, when people romanticize flying first class, obviously flying is not the most comfortable experience, for anybody, but first class seats take up a lot more space. They're heavier. They also cut down on the capacity of the plane. So they have a much, much larger carbon footprint than an economy class seat does. That may be a bummer to some people. I'm not saying you can't treat yourself. I'm just giving you the information. And nonstop flights are really helpful as well because most of the emissions that happen during flight happen during takeoff and landing. So that is a nice excuse to book yourself a nonstop flight if you are traveling somewhere. And then getting involved. I mean, there are a lot of other aspects that I talk about in the book. I talk about dating. I talk about weddings. I talk about sexing and dating and, sustainable sex and things like that. But, activism is important. So the book is really about personal habits and the shifts there. Because I think a lot of times we wait for some politician to legislate change for us. And that's not happening right now. That's not happening in a positive way, at least right now for us. So if you know of local candidates in your area, I don't care what level it's at, who are interested in running for government or who are wanting to do positive things for the environment or for people or for animals, by golly, leverage whatever resources you can and volunteer your time or your money or your skills to help them out. And I recommend that for not just political activism, but also the nonprofits that are out there doing great work. It's no secret that folks and organizations that are working to help the environment and disenfranchise people and animals, they're not like millionaires. They're not the 1%. So they can use all the help that they can get. And my hope is that my readers will feel invigorated after reading the book and they'll be like, holy shit, I want to do more. And I've actually seen that on social media. People will finish the book and then they'll tag me in a picture of them going to, their local alderman's office and trying to organize a beach cleanup or whatever it is. And that's like so exciting to me because that makes me feel encouraged that people are starting to feel that spark of hope again, that they are truly the ones who can help get us out of this mess.
Such great tips, Ashlee, and like super duper practical. And, it's funny as you were mentioning about putting things in your bag, like at the grocery store or the drugstore. It's funny, the other day, I had forgotten my reusable bag, but I needed to pick up a few things. So I'm like shoving all I can into, of course, my Matt and Nat vegan bag. And then I couldn't fit in like this huge thing of spinach and this, big thing, box of cereal and like something other large. And so I carry it out in my arms and I just walk out with it. And I was like, oh my gosh, nobody stopped me, but I'm like, I look odd. I look like I have just like taken these things and walked out and I have this huge bag full of groceries. So it's just like this funny moment.
Cheerios,
totally. I mean, what are you going to do?
You're holding them like a baby and leaving the store. But but that experience makes you so appreciative almost of like your hands and being able to walk. I know it sounds kind of like silly and heavy handed, but like we are able to carry things. It's not that hard. So that's why I think that's awesome that you did that.
Yeah, it was just one of those things where I was like, okay, this isn't so bad. And I got everything I needed. So yeah, just one thing to keep in mind, listeners. Sometimes you just carry it right on out. Or as you said, you just always have it with you, like a little one of those tiny little ones that you can just always have in your bag for those moments. And you're like, oh, let me pop in and you hadn't planned on it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think these are all, you do what you can. Like we talked about this even when we were booking the podcast, and I think you had mentioned something like, I used a disposable fork, and you felt very like, you seemed like you felt really guilty about it. And that stuff happens to everybody. And I think it's like important to just, it's about our intention, and it's about, I would say like 80 to 90% of the time doing our utmost, and then sometimes giving yourself the grace to not be perfect. We're all trying to learn this new way to live. And we're going to mess up occasionally, and that's okay. And I try to emphasize that in the book and just in my life too. Like, hey, the fact that you're trying like is amazing, because I'm sure you hear this too from people, like especially now in the new year, who are like, I'm trying Veganuary and I'm going to be vegan for January. And then, they'll message you and they'll be like, oh my God, but I had a string cheese. I'm like, it's okay. Like you're doing your best. So I think everybody just, as best as they can is trying to do good for the planet.
Yeah, it's so funny you mentioned that, Ashlee, too, though. I remember I was at Chipotle and I got your email and you're like, yeah, it'd be great. Let's set up the podcast. And I had forgotten my little reusable fork that I always have in my bag, but I'd taken it out to wash it and forgot to put it back in. And I was like, oh my gosh, I feel so guilty. I'm at Chipotle using an actual like plastic fork. And you were like, it's okay.
You're a queen. Yeah, you're an absolute queen. I mean, look at you. You're doing all the good you do in the world, and you're doing a podcast just on how to help the planet. So I think your fork sin is absolved.
Well, my last question for you, Ashlee, is the name of this podcast is Tranquility du Jour, right? So this idea of how do we find more tranquility in our everyday? So I'm curious for you, with everything that you've got going on, how do you infuse tranquility into your daily life?
Well, I wish I could say that I'm a good meditator, but I'm not. I'm trying. I feel like every year, especially at the beginning of the year, I'm like, I'm going to get better at meditating. I'm going to be more consistent. This is going to sound kind of cheesy, but these are the things that really make me feel great and make my life feel very smooth and wonderful, and put me in a good state of feeling thankful. So cleaning my house is something that actually makes me feel very tranquil, especially after it's done. I last year started a gratitude journal, which some people thought was pretty cheesy, but I'm not joking when I say that it completely fucking transformed my life in every possible way, from relationships to professionally to, personally, to my relationship with my body, with my family. Everything got better when I started focusing on and being grateful for what was wonderful and already in my life. And I also got really into the law of attraction too. So listening to podcasts and reading books around that makes me feel very peaceful, to feel like, the universe isn't, I think our lives are busy, and sometimes we get into this place where we're like, God's against me, or the universe, whatever you believe in, is testing me. And that's one way to look at life, but it taught me kind of another way to look at life, which is or it could completely have your back. And, we worry about so many things, and it just helped me to squelch some of that worry, be more joyful and present with, like I said, the things that are in my life, and be really optimistic and excited for the future. I've always been a big striver, a big type A planner. I'm still putting in the work, but I wasn't doing as much of trying to figure out the hows and, worrying, kind of future worrying or projecting on how things could go wrong. Instead, I was just waking up every morning, really invigorated, I'm excited to start this day. This life is incredible. And then hot baths. I've always been a bath taker, so that's a big treat for me. I'm the kind of person who I won't get an apartment if it doesn't have a bathtub. And so, that always makes me feel, and some combination of those two always makes me feel incredible.
I love that. It's such a good reminder. I have a friend who recently reviewed a book that I am just putting out, and she said, I love all your stuff, but
I want to review it.
Ooh, I'll send you a copy. But she was she was like, oh, I love everything, but I don't have a bathtub, because of course I talk about baths a lot. And I was like, oh my gosh, you don't have a bathtub? Can I mail you one? I felt so sorry for her. She's like, it's okay. I go to the sauna.
And the sauna is great too. I mean, it would be a real dream to have a bathtub and a sauna together in one place. That would be a clawfoot tub and a sauna together. Would be unbelievable.
Yes.
But yeah, I'm so surprised by, I don't know if it's this way where you are, how many new apartments just don't have bathtubs at all. It's almost seen as being not cool to have a bathtub. And I'm always looking for those vintage places that have an old school clawfoot tub, because I think just you soak so well in those. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'm with you. Baths forever.
Baths forever. Baths for everyone.
Yeah, baths for, my mom is she only takes baths. She does, you show her a shower, she's like, get out of here with that. She'll wash her hair in the bath.
Yeah.
I come from a long line of, I shower still, but I come from a long line of women who hang out in the tub, basically.
It's a good place to be.
I think so too. Totally. Well, you're just a delight, and I totally want to read your book, but I will buy it. Is it available to buy it?
Well, it's funny.
Pre-order?
We uploaded it at 2 a.m. last night, and so we are waiting for Amazon to flip the switch. And so hopefully by the time this airs, it should absolutely be out. But yeah, it's called Year of Tranquility. Well, thank you so much, Ashlee, for being here today. It's been an absolute treat.
Oh, I feel the same way. I hope sometime we'll get to meet IRL.
Yeah. Here's what regular retreater Courtney had to say about her Costa Rica experience. This retreat is magical. It's the perfect blend of movement, creativity, and utter relaxation. Kimberly's yoga practice combines asana and breathwork in ways that have left me relaxed and energized at the same time. Even better, the creativity sessions have helped unlock my right side brain, which has been used very little during my legal career, opening up a whole new world to me and giving me the courage to explore my artistic side on my own. In short, the changes I've experienced on my retreats with Kimberly have led to a life-altering adjustment in my career and family relationships. In addition, Pura Vida is a beautiful resort with caring staff and experienced practitioners who offer a wide range of bodywork options. But maybe my favorite retreat activity has been resting in a hammock between classes and treatments, listening to the birds, and catching up on the latest bestseller with a smoothie or a glass of white wine. You can learn more at KimberlyWilson.com/Costa Rica. So you can find Ashlee over at ashleepiper.com, and it's ASHLEEPIPER. Also, you can find her book on her website. Facebook, she's The Little Foxes, the LIL Foxes. Instagram, Ashlee Piper. And then on Twitter, The Lil Foxes, LILFOXES. So there's a link in the show notes to Year of Tranquility, which I mentioned earlier and we'll be talking a lot more about. So download that app if you don't have it already. And then also there's a link to TDJ Live, the New Year's edition, for anyone who missed it. And of course, there's links to social media. Find me on Instagram, Pinterest, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. Pretty much they're all at Tranquility du Jour, except for Twitter. I was able to get Kimberly Wilson, so you'll find that. And then also you can find a link to Tranquility, the seasonless, vegan, locally made, eco-friendly fashion line that I've been designing and creating since 2002. Also, you can browse my 6 books, now 6, over on the website. And then also you can find out a little bit more about various courses, online courses that I'm doing and will be creating. And then download the Tranquility du Jour podcast app for iPhone and Android, and read about my passion for animals. Again, all of this over in the show notes, KimberlyWilson.com/439. Finally, if you have a moment to pin a review of this show on iTunes and or share this podcast via social media, I would be so grateful. And ideally, we're helping others do good and do better for the planet, live better, and save the planet. And then also pin a review of any of my books on Amazon or Goodreads. Would be so grateful. Thank you so much for tuning in, and thank you for being with Tranquility du Jour. Some of you new listeners, some of you for many years. And I hope that 2019 is filled with good things for each of you. Namaste.